Those lines illustrate this writer so well. A woman keenly aware of the world around her, one who appreciates greatly and seeks ways to better whatever situation she is able to. Melina says her work is always about self-awareness and soul development, fitting for someone who's also a spiritual director, retreat leader, gardener, and contemplative, and has served as an educator, leader, and leadership consultant, and director of people and programs, including right here at PayPal. Most recently, she journeyed as primary caregiver to her mother, who died under hospice care in January. Melina lives in central Connecticut with husband Ed, who's also here today, and near her beloved children and their families. And yes, she lives in the midst of miracles. Melina,
hi everyone. So my thesis, who am I actually? My thesis is mostly around the work that I do in the garden and the lessons that it teaches me, and how it grows me and settles me, and excites me and calms me. And so this is one little chapter or one little essay from it. It's called Bearded Iris. I was about 10 years old when I saw my first blue and gold miracle, Iris germanica, bearded iris. There are moments and experiences from my life that are as clear in my mind as the moment they happened. That single pale blue bloom on a thick stem above spear-shaped leaves is one of those experiences. I can see my 10-year-old self in blue cotton shorts, pink t-shirt, and white cotton sneakers, the kind with the rubber covering the toes, standing beside the front steps of a friend's dark brown house, so captivated by a flower that I forgot to knock on the door. I got very close to that flower. It had 3 upward-facing petals, which I now know are called standards, and 3 downward-facing petals called falls. I touched the soft golden yellow of the beard that grew on the falls and drew away an index finger covered in pollen. I bent my nose to the flower's center and inhaled the scent of heaven, light, sweet, unlike anything else I have ever found. I am not sure how long I stood there enraptured before Trudy, who was expecting me, came outside, and together we ran across the street to the little wooded plot to build a fort among the raspberry brambles. I drive by that house occasionally, and I always glance to the same spot where the iris still blooms in my memory, its beauty capturing the imagination of a child. Light blue bearded iris now line the walkway from my front door to driveway, and every day of their yearly bloom in June, I stop and bury my nose deep in the cup of their blossoms, like some sort of flower sommelier. They still smell like heaven. They share their space with hydrangea, salvia, coreopsis, evening primrose, black-eyed Susan, purple cone flowers, garlic chive sedum, and bachelor's buttons. Walk down the cobbled pavers in late June or early July, and you will find yourself in a swirl of color, scent, and sound. As plants bloom, perfume rises into the warm air, and bees buzz and bustle among the flowers. I live in the midst of miracles. I do this on purpose. My first teacher in the garden was my father, and he learned how to grow things from his own father. I did not learn about flowers, though, from either of them. My father's parents, Giuseppe Salafia and Carmelina Carta, both immigrated to Middletown, Connecticut from its sister city, Melilla, a tiny town on the southeast coast of Sicily. My grandfather came alone as a very young man and lived with his brothers, who were already here. My grandmother, still a child, came with her parents. Giuseppe and Carmelina met and married here. In Sicily, the Salafia family was very poor. The Cartas were more affluent, though affluence is a perspective of time and place. The Salafias eked out a living fishing, growing vegetables, and tending sheep. Young Giuseppe was taken out of school after 3rd grade and sent into the mountains alone as a shepherd for his family's small flock. He was 8 years old. His mother, Anna, packed bread, cheese, and dried fish for him, and one of his 8 siblings would hike up to the pasture land every 3 days to bring him fresh supplies. He learned to trap rabbits, wring their necks, skin and roast them over scrub fires. He learned what plants he could and could not eat. He learned to protect the sheep and lambs. He learned that life was hard and food was sometimes a luxury. When my grandfather bought his own home here in the States and moved his young family into the house on Bidwell Terrace, he purchased a cow for milk. He planted pear, plum, and apple trees. He grew tomatoes and jarred their sauce. He grew peppers that he roasted on an outside fire before rubbing the blackened skin from them and preserving them in jars of lemon juice and olive oil for pepper and egg sandwiches that were made with the thick, crusty bread my grandmother baked every Wednesday. He did all of this while working full-time making men's suspenders at the Russell Company mills down the street. He used every bit of space to grow food, and yet his 5 children sometimes went to bed hungry. It was the time of the Great Depression, and the Salafia family was still poor. My father remembered that hunger and its antidote all his life. He remembered his soft-hearted mother crying every spring as the new calf was taken from its protesting mother to become veal sausage, which she refused to eat. He remembered his father making sun-dried tomatoes on old window screens that had been scrubbed with an iron brush and sterilized with boiling water. He remembered clearing the cowshed and spreading manure and straw around the fruit trees and in the vegetable patch to boost yield. He remembered feeling wealthy when the family could afford a piece of chicken or rabbit on Sundays. He remembered his aunts using hard-boiled eggs to provide some protein for the Christmas lasagna. He remembered all the lessons of his childhood when, a grown man and father of 2, he moved our family from Middletown to Cromwell, Connecticut in 1973. The house we moved from was small, neat, and new, with a postage stamp-sized yard. The house we moved to, an 1850s farmhouse, was larger, dilapidated, and outdated, but it had a huge yard and an old barn and lean-to. My mother hated that house. It was cold, drafty, and dusty. Every room in the house was painted dark blue. 4 years before we bought it, the house had been purchased by a young couple with newborn twin girls. When those babies were 2, their father had drowned in a boating accident on the Connecticut River. In her grief, his young widow had painted the house to reflect her affect. My mother set to work with brush, roller, and white paint almost immediately. As much as my mother hated that house, my father loved it. He loved the possibilities and potential of it. Mostly he loved the yard with its own small woodlot at the top of the westward hill, which sloped down gently to the house and outbuildings, all of which were nestled under the spreading branches of an immense old sugar maple. Within a year or 2, my father had planted a small orchard of peach, plum, and apple trees below the woodlot. He had a large grape arbor to the south of the trees and a huge vegetable garden at the base of the hill, where the sun shone all day. He did not plant flowers. When my mother dared to plant a rose bush beneath the dining room window one warm June day in my 15th year, he begrudged her the space. I had seldom seen any tension between them, but that red rose bush caused him to shake his head in disapproval while she set her chin in determination. The need to provide sang in his blood, and while we put up bushels of peppers, tomatoes, corn, and broccoli, we never had a vase of homegrown flowers on the table. My father didn't see the point in having them. When I showed my own home to my father years after his health failed, and my parents had moved to an apartment to spare him from shoveling and raking, his first comment was, "Honey, what a garden we could have in this backyard." He was right about that, though it does not look at all like his did, with its straight lines of peppers and tomatoes growing in military formation and where nothing ever bloomed except fruit trees and vegetables. My garden is lush and curvy, a feminist garden. Perennials like rhubarb, asparagus, chives, and horseradish grow in clumps instead of rows. Calendula, borage, and dill self-seed each year, and I am content to let them grow where they choose. I am looser with the rules than my dad was, but I am every bit as serious about the garden. You see, flowers and fruit feed my soul. They bring beauty and vitality to what was once an expanse of lifeless lawn. My gardens are my own little slices of Eden, places for life to emerge. My blood sings with the need to provide, not just for my family and friends, but for nature itself, of which I am the tiniest part for this one moment in time. In good years, my father and his ancestors were subsistence gardeners, growing enough for their families, but with nothing extra for selling or sharing. There was never really enough time or space to grow anything that did not contribute to the dinner table. Beauty was saved for church. Their eyes were focused on survival. I have been fortunate to live in a place and time where food is plentiful and where beauty is not superfluous, but necessary. My family is not poor, and we are surrounded by flowers from April through October. Thank you.